It's my privilege to introduce Megan. I've known Megan for a number of years. We didn't quite go to school together, but really close. I always thought of Megan as being a wicked smart person, and she spent a ton of time in the DoD, now at NFM, I believe. Yep. And has just, spent a ton of time doing things like building vulnerability programs. And I think that she has a lot to offer, and we are happy to have her at KernelCon more than once, a repeat speaker. Yeah, you don't quite get the 5-timer coin, but that's not your fault. That's because there was this thing called a pandemic that happened. Yeah. So, yeah. So, but appreciate everybody helping us get past that. It looks like we have a pretty good event. I hope you're having a good time. I hope that this worked out this year, and we'll see you again in the future. And with that, I'll hand it over to Megan.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So, good morning. It's still morning, and thank you guys for coming to see me speak. I know it's the second day of the con, and everybody's hungover from the party last night, and it's Saturday, and nobody really wants to be here. So, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your weekend to come and see me talk, even if you only did it for the CPEs or whatever. So, when I saw this movie title, I just was like, wow, this is every day at work, right? This is just incident response. But the theme of this year's conference and science and applying methods to the madness, this is what I'm trying to do here. So I'm trying to give you some methods to apply to the madness to make your ability to analyze and triage alerts better. So a little bit about me. I did graduate from UNO in 2022. I've worked in the private sector. I worked in retail. I worked for the DoD for a while. Don't work for the DoD. But I graduated and I just went straight into information assurance, which was what we called cybersecurity before people decided cybersecurity sounded cooler than information assurance. And I've probably worked with some of you. I work with at least one of you. I don't know why you're in here because, you do this every day with me, right? I appreciate the support. No. So it's kind of funny because apparently I don't have enough hobbies. And so this last year I had gone through the 200-hour course to become a yoga instructor right before the pandemic and everything shut down. So I didn't do a lot of yoga, but I did become certified to teach mixed fit, which is kind of a cardio dance thing. And so we had a Shake Your Shamrock event, and it was a really good time. But if you ever want to learn how to get your heart rate up, it is the second best way to get your heart rate up. I'll tell you about the first best way in a minute. I apologize for the memes. It's the only way I know to communicate. They were all vetted by my 15-year-old son who says they're dank, no cap. I don't know what that means, but I'm going to say it probably means that they're good, and my words are my own and not my employer's. So if you've done any sort of work in incident response, assessing alerts and deciding where to start is overwhelming, even in the best of times. It's easy to overlook something important or to blow something unimportant completely out of proportion, or to just sit there in this constant state of paranoia that you're missing something. Am I missing something here, right? So about 12 years ago, I went through an incident response boot camp at the MITRE Cyber Range in Quantico, which is every bit as fun as it sounds, because we spent a week using a checklist to work HPSS alerts by the book. Every single alert, we filled out the checklist. How many of you know what HPSS is? Okay, I'm sorry. So it's a host-based security system, and it was not fun. It was very limited. And we did this for a week, documented every step along the way. And it was tedious, but it taught us the process for gathering information, just the same way every single time and asking the same questions every single time. So I took this checklist and I've adapted it to suit various workplaces over the years since, thank God, I'm not using HPSS to work alerts, and only HPSS to work alerts. So I'm going to walk through some basic triage guidance, the information collection checklist, which I talked to Tim. I'm going to get it put up on the website, so don't freak out trying to write everything down here. It's going to be available to you later. So caveats. This is not one size fits all. Your organization is not mine. I have tried to keep this tool agnostic in terms of I'm not going to talk about what specific SIM. I hope you have a SIM. I'm not going to talk about a specific EDR. you should have an EDR. If you build this in your own environment, tell people what data sources you want them to look at based on what you're looking for, because you might check the firewall logs and forget about your NIDs, right? People get wrapped up, and that's where going back to this checklist and saying, did I check this? Did I check this? Did I check this? It really comes in handy. And if you're listening to this and thinking, gee, I don't know where I get that information, you probably need to do something about that. You need something that is covering all of your assets. You need a SIM. You need it configured correctly. You need the right log sources in there. You need email security. You need EDR. If you do not have these things, it will make it very difficult to investigate alerts. And I know it's difficult because I was doing this boot camp. I bumped the cable, sorry. I was doing this boot camp, and all I had was HPSS, and I'm like, where's my firewall logs? I need my firewall logs. I'm sorry. So make sure you have that data available. And this is not foolproof. I'm not perfect. There's probably things I'm missing here. Take it and make it better, right? Make it your own. Is it practical to use this on every single alert? No, it is not. You are busy. But it's a good training tool, and during an incident, it's a great sanity check to make sure you've checked everything and covered all of your bases, but you're not going to want to use it on every alert, every single day. Once you use this process a few times, it becomes a lot more second nature. So you log in, and you have your wall of alerts, right? Maybe your environment's really tuned and it's not quite a huge wall, but you log in and you've got a lot of alerts, and you're like, where do I even start with this? So when I start, what I'm mostly looking for is, have we seen this alert before? And not just me, but we, because you should have some knowledge base or documentation for your team that has information about your common alerts, common triggers, common IPs that are hard to hunt down. And if you have that proper documentation around that and it's accessible to everyone, it is really easy to determine if something is benign or false positive just right out of the gate. And it'll save you time investigating in the end. So don't waste time doing research you or someone else has already done. Document this stuff and have it in a central location. If you're new, you're like, everything is new. I have no idea what I'm doing here. If you've got a knowledge base to work off of, your job's going to be 10 times easier. So if you check it out and it's a known false positive or it's benign activity and you just can't tune it, close it. You're done. Boom. You don't need a checklist for that. If you're looking through your documentation, you're like, oh, this is bad. Well, we're going to start the checklist. We're going to start collecting information. So the opposite side of that, I've never seen this alert before. It can be good and it can be bad. It could be a new signature that just needs tuning. It could be something really, really wrong. So even if it's a low severity alert, if you log in and there's a ton of them, it's a distraction, right? You need to tune that as soon as possible because something important is going to get buried in there. I also like to keep an eye out for anomalies. And this is just something that comes from time and experience working in an organization. You know who your frequent flyers are, right? You know who the usual offenders are. You know that when Commvault does backups, it triggers a bunch of false positives. But when you suddenly get a bunch of alerts for, and it's not necessarily, say, like an actual suspicious domain, but maybe it's a sort of suspicious domain, like it's a content hosting site. And you've got 5 of them that come in at once, and you're like, I've never seen that, and that's weird. Yeah, it turns out that it could be a phishing attack, and that's your first indicator that something is wrong. I also like to look at the alert severity and confidence level. If it's a critical or high alert, you shouldn't ignore it, right? Unless you are really sure it's a false positive. If it says things like curb roasting or Mimikatz or Metasploit, it is probably not a false positive. It's time to start collecting information immediately. So a fun story, we had one of our sysadmins decide to try to test Credential Guard on his system by trying to run Mimikatz on it. And incidentally seeing Mimikatz on the workstation of a senior sysadmin with domain admin privileges and global admin privileges and all the privileges and everything, it is the first best way to get your heart rate up. Right there. Yeah, so we had a really nice conversation about how you don't do that and you don't give Megan a heart attack, and he works on our team now, and I love him to pieces. So anyway, it was a happy ending. The other thing I like to look at is how many different tools are alerting on the same system, because multiple sources telling you that something is wrong with the same system is always a good reason to investigate. I don't think I've had any incidents where I didn't have more than one system telling me that something was wrong, or more than one type of alert for the same system. So if this guy generates one alert, if this guy's got like 10 and they're all different and they all have things that you've never seen before, you might want to start with him. So once we've chosen an alert to start with, we're going to start with a checklist in our initial information gathering. What do you collect first? What's in the alert, right? So we're going to start with our source and destination IPs, host names, and domains. If you don't have that in the alert, you'll find it later, possibly. It may not be applicable, but whatever you have, just document it. If you have an IP and you don't have a host name or domain associated with it, do some light investigative work, but don't sink a whole lot of time into it yet, because you will cover that later. Usernames, if it's a user-based alert, like this guy clicked on a suspicious link. If you have more than one user engaging in a suspicious activity and you notice that they're all visiting like the same funny domain, put them all into one investigation, document all of them. A system or process-based alert from your AV or EDR, there's a username associated with that process, write it down. You need it. If it's not there, you'll find it later. Processes, file names, hashes, parent processes, file paths. If it's in the alert, document it, because you will use those later to do your investigation. The alert source, console, and severity, and how many alerts there are that appear to be tied to the same system. I kind of mentioned that already, but if you have multiple types of alerts for that same IP, it's probably all part of the same incident. Don't work them separately. Don't start on this guy and then come back later and realize, oh, there's like 20 more, right? And I should have included that. And again, if you have more than one alert console, give it a quick look. If it's firing alerts in more than one system, put them all together in the same documentation. Importantly, you will also put down the time of the alert, the time you started working the alert, and your name, your escalation point on duty, if that's applicable, and when the alert was escalated to them. Because if this turns into what I call a capital I incident, there's the little incidents and then there's the incidents. You want this documented early on because you don't want to be trying to make guesses at it later. So from this basic info, we're going to make some additional checks to see if this alert needs to be escalated or worked as a priority, or if it can be deprioritized. Is this a new false positive? Look at the signature if it's available to you in the activity being detected. A network IDS might trip false positives for any variety of reasons, not the least of which is because the signature sucks. And let me tell you, if you're running Snort, Suricata, open source signatures, a lot of them suck. I have seen bad detections, bad new detections for every vendor. Cisco, thank you, Cisco. Thursday, that was my day. I had a lot of emails. There's also benign system processes or user software that will trip behavioral alerts. This is where documenting your known false positives or benign activity will save you time in the future. So double check your knowledge base. Make sure we don't already know about this. We haven't already seen it before. Is this a new signature, right? Old signature, new false positive. Now we have new signatures, and maybe it just needs tuning, right? On the other hand, it could be detecting an emerging or zero-day threat. And this is your first indication that you got targeted. You may need to dig a little deeper to find out which one it is, but still, if it's available, make a note of how recently the signature was released and start analyzing it, because even if it's like benign or low severity, if it's just crushing you with alerts, you need to move on. It needs to get tuned. Is there any open source intelligence around this alert? Now, some alerts might include a CVE number. Go research it, right? Search the internet. You'll find all sorts of things like people complaining on Reddit about false positives, people on GitHub saying, why is Microsoft detecting this file as bad? It's been there for 2 years. Or they could be talking about a new emerging threat on Twitter and you just realize that, yeah, we got targeted with this one. So do some quick research on it, determine how to prioritize it, and it's totally fair. If you're looking at it and you're like, you know what, I think this is kind of bogus and I got my wall of alerts to deal with, I'm going to put it to the side and I'm going to go work something a little spicier. Unfortunately, we're not necessarily going to say good or bad on a lot of alerts. You're going to have to investigate it, and this information is not enough to start with. So what we're going to do is figure out what general category the alert falls into. And this is mine. You may decide to do this differently, but this is how I have organized it. So most alerts are going to fall into either suspicious communication, potential malware, or potential phishing. Some incidents are going to involve all three of these, but we're going by what console gave us the alert. If it came from my network IDS or my firewall, I don't have any process information or user information, I'm going to start with suspicious communication. If it's coming from my EDR or my AV and it doesn't like this file or this behavior from this file, start with potential malware. If it's an alert that a user clicked on a potential phish, or they have a suspicious login attempt, use the phishing category, because in my experience, every time I've gotten an alert because this guy had a suspicious login attempt, it's because he clicked on a phishing email and lost his password. So we also use that process to investigate reported phishing emails, because if somebody's reporting an email, you have to ask yourself, how many other people got this? This guy didn't click on the link necessarily, but some other people might have. Or they clicked on it and then they reported it to you and they didn't tell you that they clicked on it, and you have a problem. So anyway, you may end up using more than one set of questions. That's totally cool, right? But this is just where to start from the alert that you have. So as far as suspicious communication, again, we're going to be writing things down. We're going to document the IPs and host names of the systems involved. If you don't have those, you're going to find them. And it's important because if you can't find the host name for the system, or you can't pin it down to a switch or some other interface on like some networking equipment, is it a rogue? Because rogues are bad news, right? It could be an actual adversary. It could be a vendor plugging something in without permission. It could be someone brought their home machine to work and they plugged it into the network and it happens to have a virus on it and you're about to have a bad day. If it's a rogue, you're going to follow your IR processes for seeking and destroying, or however you handle rogues. But if you're unable to find the actual source of the activity and you have reason to believe that it's something on your network, you escalate it to your IR and you start documenting, right? We're also going to look at the scope. Is it one source to many destinations, many sources to one destination, or just one-to-one? Depending on the initial scope of the alert, you may find that when you start researching additional systems, that there's more than one system communicating with the same IP. But you're only getting an alert for this one particular type of traffic. And it turns out everybody's doing it. And then now it turns out that maybe it's Microsoft and there's just something about that communication that the IDS didn't like. So looking at the scope and digging into that a little bit, the more systems you have engaging in the activity as part of the normal course of business, it's a lot less likely that it's something actually malicious. And really, if you've got like a million alerts and you've got like every system on your network is communicating with this IP, don't write all of them down. You don't have to. I mean, if it's an actual incident and they're all talking to some command and control, okay, you have to write that down. But at this point in your investigation, get a sample. Don't sit there and be like, I gotta do this, Megan said it. I didn't tell you to write them all down, I promise. We're also going to consider if it is internal to remote, internal to internal, or remote to internal. If the alert involves potential command and control traffic, but the source and destination are both internal, that's not very good command and control, right? It's probably a false positive of some sort. So make sure you're documenting that. If one of the IPs is remote, does it have domain information? What sort of reputation does that domain or IP have? Do you have URL filtering traffic to that IP? Can you search your EDR for that IP or domain or URL and see what the user was doing? You might need to check your logs to get the full context. An IP isn't enough. It's not enough to make a determination on something being good or bad, because you have virtual hosting. A lot of systems sit behind one IP. you need to know which domain or URL or whatever it is they actually hit. You're also going to want to document the ports and services involved. Things like TCP, UDP, ICMP, is it FTP, SNMP, all that needs to be written down. The alert may only be for one service, but like I mentioned earlier, check your logs for additional traffic between the systems. So if you are seeing additional like anomalous traffic between the two, like HTTP traffic going out over DNS ports, you might want to take note of that. If you have packet captures, collect them and review them. If you don't, I'm sorry, because I love me some PCAPs, right? You may be able to determine if this is a false positive or benign activity from just this step alone, right? You look at the PCAP and you're like, this is just internal stuff. It's not a big deal. A lot of incidental internal network stuff gets flagged as malicious, and it's not. It just happens. By the way, if you get a lot of those, try to tune them, just so you're not having to work the same alert 20 times a day. So if you've gotten this far and you're still kind of on the fence about whether it's actually good or bad, we're going to dig in a little bit more. So is this expected or unusual activity for these systems from a service level? If you're new to an environment, it helps to learn a lot more about what makes your environment tick. Are you a Windows shop? Are you a Linux shop? Where is your email hosted? What are your DC's name, right? You are going to have to do some hunting to find out, if this is a server, what's on that server, what's normal for that server, and that may involve looking at a lot of historical traffic to see what's been going on. So if you have DNS traffic to the internet from your domain controllers or your DNS servers, that's normal. If it gets flagged because there's something anomalous about it, and you look at it and you're like, this looks fine and normal, all right. But if you've got DNS traffic from Joe in accounting's laptop to a shady IP in Russia, that's not normal. People should not have DNS going to anything other than the domain controllers or your DNS servers. It's a red flag, right? You want to check that out. If you have inbound FTP traffic to your FTP server, good job. That's what you want, unless it's like some sort of attack against it, but the presence of the traffic is not a problem. The presence of outbound FTP traffic from your file share is a problem. So you have to understand what these systems are, what they're used for, and how normal use looks for them. And we're also going to look back at the historical information to see if this is new activity or not. If it is not new activity and it's been going on a long time, the odds go up significantly that it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. If it just started recently, maybe some new software is installed. I don't know. If it's a rogue, you want to know when it got on your network, right? So you're going to document all of that. As another example of dealing with like rogues or bad communications, domain controller replication activity, right? That's totally normal to see on your network. It is not normal to see replication to a non-domain controller IP. It's worse to see it to a rogue device, and that is another really good way to get your heart rate up. If you have an EDR, can you track down the source process for the activity? Search your EDR for the IP, track down the source process, and document it. Because you're going to pivot to the malware analysis from that point, and you're going to investigate the actual process. So you get your process, the parent process, the username the process is running under. If it all looks good, rule it out as benign and close it. Another good question to ask is the communication successful or not? Did your firewall block it? Did your EDR block it? How big was the scope of the potential bad activity? Because it's bad when a user makes a suspicious DNS request. It's worse when it succeeds, right? So if you're looking at a potential incident, you want to know what has been successful and what hasn't been, because that will help you decide how IR is going to go. So by this point, you've either collected enough information to determine this is benign, or you have some evidence that it's potentially malware and you need to do a deeper dive, or it's a rogue and you need to get them off the network, right? This can be difficult because you may not have strong evidence one way or another. You could work an alert all day long and not come up with a real, this is exactly why this fired. Because sometimes I don't know either. And I've been doing this for 20 years, right? So eventually you have to put it down and say, you know what, if the system throws another alert, I'll take another look at it, but I need to move on. But if we have a suspicious source process, we're going to start looking at malware. So going back to the alert, is this a behavioral-based alert, like word.exe launched a child process, which I don't like to see either, or did the file trip a conventional antivirus signature? If it's a behavioral alert that involves suspicious communication, but the alert started from your EDR and not your IDS, you're going to want to document the IPs, go back to the suspicious communication process, and start investigating that, because that's where you're going to investigate, is this IP address really bad? What did this person do? Behavioral alerts involving hacking tool use, like someone taking a memory dump or running Mimikatz, those should be immediately escalated to IR because they are always bad. They are. We're also going to document where the alert was found, how it was found, and what action your endpoint protection took. All of this is going to provide context around the scope. If the file is in the user's download folder and it was a real-time detection and the file was deleted, what probably happened? Someone tried to download something and AV blocked it, and now you just mostly have to try to figure out why they tried to do the bad thing in the first place, okay? If it's in their download folder and it was found during a scheduled scan, or say it was in their internet cache, okay, that file's been on their system for a while. My approach to investigating that, my perspective on it has changed now. If it's finding files in their installed programs folder during a scheduled scan, or in system 32, we have a much, much bigger problem on our hands because things found in scheduled scans may have been on the system for a while, are now being detected as malicious, and I do see false positives with those, but it could be an indication that something is really, really wrong. My other favorite is, it's an email attachment and was found on my mail programs cache. It was found during a scheduled scan. And now I'm searching through all my emails trying to figure out when this guy got this attachment. And sometimes I'm not finding it because it's more than 30 days old. And then I'm like, Microsoft, why did it take you so long to figure out this one was bad? But when you're finding stuff in different places, it helps to know how the operating system works, why files are in certain places, and then that helps you figure out what your response is going to look like. And while you're at it, are the security-related services on that system running properly? Is endpoint detection still running? Are your users constantly canceling the scheduled scans? They might need to be talked to. We're also going to document the account the suspicious process is running under and if that is the expected user account for the system. So I work at the Mart, we have people on the sales floor, 20 people log in that system a day. I can't tell you who the primary user is. But a lot of our home office users, they have a person assigned to them. And if somebody else's credentials are being used on that laptop, that's a problem. If that person doesn't work in IT, that's an even bigger problem. Processes running under unexpected accounts, especially privileged ones, definitely need to be escalated. And if that account has local or domain admin and you're pretty sure it has no business being on there, you're going to have a bad day. So we're going to step back and we're going to look at the parent process too. Is it known good, known bad? Do you need to investigate that too? Is it engaging in normal activity or not? Where did it spawn from and what spawned it? Write all that stuff down. Also, can you get a copy for analysis? Fetching a file off of a system for analysis can take a really long time sometimes. When I get an alert, that's usually the first thing that I do. I'm clicking that button to try to fetch it. So, I know, right? That's actually my catchphrase at work is that's a paddle-in. That's a paddle-in for everything. So some of this information that we've collected is going to help us rule out the alert as a false positive or benign. But if we're not sure, we're pretty sure that we're dealing with malware, but we're not sure how bad it is, we're going to have to look a little deeper. So if it's a signature-based alert, is more than one system, like more than one vendor, reporting the hasher file as malicious? One AV vendor flagging a file as a potential malware, it does not necessarily make for an emergency. Rarely, it is a very early indicator, but for the most part, And if you look at it as clam AV, don't trust it. They flag everything as malicious. But if it's one vendor, I'm not going to worry about it a whole lot. If everybody is like, this is bad, you have a problem on your hands, I'm a lot more inclined to believe it. And not all malicious software is created equal, right? Is it adware? Is it spyware? Is it a bad browser plugin? Is it Wave browser? Like, oh my God, people, like all the time. Most of the time they try to download it, but they don't actually install it because our endpoint protection keeps them from doing that. Or they realize that maybe they shouldn't be installing things and they hold off. But I worry a lot less about that than, like I said, the things that are being found in their installed programs or something. Sometimes it's just a user education issue and not a we're going to have a bad day sort of issue. So you're analyzing the file. Where is it in the attack chain, right? Is this something that is stage 1, stage 2? If you have malicious processes like somebody is scraping memory off a system, you have a long ways to go back in that attack chain because that's not the first step, right? So if you're looking at this and you realize this is farther in the chain than I want to be, you're going to be analyzing all those processes in that user system to work your way backwards. And so like I said, fetch the file, but be cognizant of what system is giving you the alert and where you're downloading it. Because if your EDR is alerting on the file and you have the EDR software installed on your workstation and you download the malicious software, what's going to happen? Yeah, you're going to go on the wall of shame. So once you've got a copy of the file, do some file emulation. My file emulation is probably one of my favorite tools, hands down, and even better, it's cheap. So we emulate files, we emulate phishing links and phishing attachments through it. It's amazing. As more files have gotten more obfuscated, especially HTML files and attachments, doing manual analysis of that stuff has gotten a lot harder. So you really need something to emulate it with. And it takes time, which is why you're fetching the file. I'm throwing it into emulation. I'm watching it while I'm gathering the rest of my documentation around the alert because all those things take time. And threat emulation reports by themselves can be really hard to interpret because sometimes something's really bad and it's like, this is bad. And I gave it 100 and there's like a skull and you're having a bad day, right? And sometimes it's like, I gave it a 72 and it looks kind of fishy, but I don't know, whatever. And you have to make a judgment call on whether it's bad or not. So understanding the malicious indicators and what is and what isn't bad is helpful. But at the end of the day, sometimes the only difference between malware and regular software is the author's intent. I have seen regular user software do all sorts of suspicious stuff that set off the EDR, that threat emulation was like, holy cow, it opened up this and it did this thing, and it's just how it works. It's just how somebody coded it. So understand what's normal and not, but also understand that some software may just behave badly. If you have CVEs involved and you see those attacks going on, make sure you're documenting that, because if your threat emulation says they're exploiting this CVE and you're looking at the endpoint, you're like, this is vulnerable to this CVE, or maybe we already patched it. Again, that's going to tell you how severe this incident is. You may have too many vulnerabilities on an endpoint to document, but if there's something new in the wild that the system is vulnerable to, and it's a very good chance that's how it was exploited, document that. Why? Because you're going to tell somebody, we need to patch this now. And they say, why? And you say, here's the bad thing that has happened. Here's my proof. I'm not pretending. We need to get these patches out now. So it's bad, right? We have actual malware and you're having a really bad day and nobody's having fun. We're going to make sure we collect some additional information to determine the scope. Now, I'm not talking about IR. Your IR processes are going to be different. This is information collection. So was the malicious activity successful or not? If the file is running an exploit, did it succeed? If it's reaching out to a command and control server, did it succeed? Was this initial exploitation or is this further in the attack chain? Make sure you document all this stuff as you're going along, because eventually you're going to write a report. Check your logs, check your EDR, what happened leading up to the alert. Document any other indicators you have, because maybe your system alerted on this guy, but it didn't alert here, and it didn't alert here, and it didn't alert here. You're going to build custom IOCs. You're going to search all of your systems for those IOCs to make sure that nothing else is infected. Once you have that full scope of infection, you're going to find out if you're going to have a bad day or a really, really bad day. And again, cross-check your other consoles. If something is wrong, it is usually really wrong, and you're going to have more than one system throwing alerts. Worst, you may have multiple systems with the same malware on them, like you found out that a bunch of people tried to download Wave Browser because they were all trying to go to the same meeting and they thought they had to download it. And now you've got to go fix all those guys up. Or maybe now this system is giving you some new alerts and you didn't notice them coming in, right? So have more bad activity on the same system. Try to stay cognizant of what's going on. Is there any indication the system was used in lateral movement? So if you've got like a user's account that's potentially been compromised and being used on other resources, you want to document all the resources that account is being used on. Is it being used on something like your file share? Does that file share have information from HR on it? Document all this stuff. If you're looking at confiscating infected systems, make sure that you're documenting who is getting what when. If you took it off the network and you did isolation, who did it when? What actions are being taken? What cleanup actions are being taken? Who completed the cleanup actions? You should have some sort of checklist for whoever is doing your cleanup to follow and sign off on at the end. So once you've worked backwards through all this, you're probably going to end up in our last chain of questioning, which is potential or actual phishing. Because there's a really good chance that all this started with a phishing email. I can't remember like what percent of compromises start with it. It's something like 90% now. But basically, you're probably going to work your way back to a phishing email, so we're going to hit on that. So phishing emails are a problem, right? And they're a really big problem. And you may start here if your alerts for some sort of risky activity or there's evidence their password has been compromised. Whatever your starting point is, document the indicators you have. If a user reports a phishing email to you, like I said, you want to investigate it because they're probably not the only person that got it. And they may have already clicked on it and they didn't tell you. And they may have already lost their credentials and they really didn't tell you, and now you're going to have a conversation, right? But it's a good thing to go through just to make sure you're hitting all your checkpoints. Most of the time, if you have multiple users receiving the same phishing messages, and they're probably from iCloud, you want to maybe see about blocking some of that stuff. Suspicious login activity. This is one of my favorites. It's usually pretty easy to rule out as benign or malicious. I'm not going to go through a whole checklist on that, but document things like your source IP, the user agent string, and any other contextual information about the resource being accessed. You're going to analyze that, and you're going to determine, was this good or bad? And if you're pretty sure it's good and you call the user and they're like, yeah, I signed in from a new phone and I was on Verizon, you're like, cool. And you're like, are you traveling in Romania? And they're like, no, I'm in the warehouse today. And you're like, oh, okay, well, your password's been reset. And we're going to have a conversation about how somebody in Romania got it. I always kind of go, and I say this, my coworker here, is that I say reset or regret it. If you've got some sort of indication that somebody's password may have been lost and you can't reach them and you got a bad feeling about it, just reset their password. I've never gotten in trouble for resetting somebody's password. The chairman of the board, I've reset his password probably at least twice. And he's like, thank you. You know, because if something bad is happening, the worst thing is you have to log into everything again, right? If you're just even the least bit worried about it, just reset it. Some people do get mad, but I'm not the one getting in trouble, so I don't care. If you do have to investigate and work backwards from like, okay, so I have a suspicious login attempt and it was definitely bad and they lost their password. Now I have to figure out what the phishing email was that got us here. This is a giant pain because if your email security sucks, searching for things like attachments or URLs may be next to impossible. You really need an email solution that's going to make this easy for you. Otherwise, you're going to be sitting there on their inbox looking through all their email, and that is not a fun time. However you get to it, you're going to find your source email, or if you're lucky, somebody reported the email and you've got the source already, and you're going to log your malicious sender. You're going to log all the recipients. If you have hundreds of recipients, don't write them all down yet, because that's a lot of time to document that, and you don't necessarily have to. You're more interested in the ones who are at risk. It's more important to find the ones that may have gotten phished and take care of them first than to write down everybody's name. And when you find those, you're going to start cleaning up mailboxes as soon as possible, because those processes take a while too. So what's the source of our phishing activity? Is it a link? Is it an attachment? Is it a link and an attachment? That's a really popular one. We're going to document any indicators that we find, and we're going to get them into our threat emulation. Did any of our recipients reply? This is an important question. If they're replying instead of reporting, that is partially a training issue. It also likely means they have a business relationship with that person and they send them expected emails. So you may have a compromised vendor who is targeting hundreds of your employees, and they probably aren't using MFA on their systems, and you're going to block them. And you're not going to unblock them until they prove that their account has been cleaned, because I have been bitten by this before. Oh yeah, it's been cleaned up, everything's fine. And then like the next day we get another wave of 200 emails, and I'm like, excuse me? Like, you said you guys were cool. Oh yeah, I guess we didn't. No, just block it. Somebody will get mad. I don't care. I'm the one who has to clean up the mess. So if somebody gets upset, they can talk to me about it, right? If you can, try to get them to enable MFA. If they're like, yeah, we enabled MFA on our accounts, okay, I'll unblock you. It gives them an incentive, right? So I mentioned file emulation already. You may need to emulate the file or the link to determine any additional domains involved in the phishing attempt. A lot of times the first link isn't the bad one, it is one later down the line. So make sure you document all the domains that are being passed through. If it's a file, we're going to document what it does. A lot of phishing emails anymore are just like, log into Microsoft, and then it just passes their credentials through to Microsoft, and they get the MFA prompt, and they're like, oh, this is fine. It's not fine. Some of them are doing weird crap, like dropping files onto the system. You want to know what those behavioral indicators are so you can search for them and see who else may have opened those attachments or clicked those links. And it happens, but almost every phishing link that I see jumps through a few different sites and ends up somewhere different. So I can search my DNS system and see who made it all the way to the end. Because some people will click it and realize something looks weird, and they'll just bail out of it and report it. The ones that made it all the way through to the end are the ones that you need to target and find out, is there anything suspicious on their activity? I need to call them. Did you submit your credentials? Those are the guys you want to focus on, not necessarily the people that made the first click. So we're going to search our EDR, we're going to search our DNS system, our firewall logs, whatever we've got, for whoever clicked the link and or saved or ran the malicious attachment. And we're going to document all the users that did that, because you received it as one thing, I actually interacted with the email is a different problem. Problems with this. Users are on mobile devices. Depending on your email security solution, you may not have a good documentation of what they did. And URL rewrite only goes so far, right? So you may never know how they got phished, and this personally drives me crazy. Because we've had people where it's like their account got phished. They have no phishing emails. They haven't had anything suspicious going on. All I conclude is that maybe they were on a home system, got a phishing email, used their corporate credentials, and got phished that way. And the only way to find that is just to talk to them and see if they remember anything, and they may not even remember it. So all you have is just reset their password and hope it doesn't happen again, which I don't personally like. So the other thing you'll see is that they'll click on a phishing link and you'll get bounced around all sorts of weird domains, and it'll start doing weird stuff, and it'll drop files, or it'll say, oh, you need to download this plugin to do this or whatever. Those are just more IOCs for you to document at the end and search your other workstations for. If people have these files on your systems, you have an incident, you've got your IR processes, and you're going to engage those. And we're always going to kind of check back, does the account show any evidence that somebody's trying to use a password? Maybe they put it in, but they put it in wrong. You see a failed password attempt around the time, but you didn't get an alert for it, right? So you still have like a little bit of like, you know what, maybe this guy did actually get phished. Maybe he didn't put the right password in the first time. Maybe we need to have a conversation about this. So check out their account. If you see any suspicious activity on, Like if you're using Azure AD or you've got a VPN, if you see anything weird going on, just reset it. And we're going to follow up, right? We have a list of users who need more training. We have users who may have or did submit their credentials. We know which accounts are potentially at risk now, and we can target those. So we're going to try to follow up with the user, right? Did you submit your credentials? If you can't reach them or they're not sure, congratulations, you just got a free password reset. If you've got alerts for them, and you know they submitted their credentials, and they use the Shaggy defense, the Shaggy defense wasn't me. It's time for that 8-hour remedial security training course or something. People who lie to me really irritate me. They may not have understood that that's what happened, but sometimes, they're lying to you. And those are the guys that we really try to hit with, no, you have to be honest with us. You're not going to get in trouble. You're doing your job. My job is to help protect you. If you clicked on the phishing link or the attachment because this guy is one of our business partners and you thought he sent you something legit, you need to talk to us. You're not going to get punished. We're here to help you and to help the business. So we try to get people on board with us, right? Now, if you have someone that potentially lost their credentials and someone else did actually successfully log in with their account, congratulations, you're having a really, 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 really bad day, and you're going to have more information to gather. And I'm not even going to get into that because there's not enough time, but see if you can run scripts to automate some of the information collection because you're going to want to look at a whole bunch of stuff there, right? So again, document your TTPs, see what you can do to prevent future incidents, right? So if you notice a pattern in these phishing domains, you might want to start proactively blocking them. I blocked .xyz, I blocked .ru, I blocked Chinese domains. There's nothing good behind XYZ, I will tell you that right now. I have never regretted blocking that top level domain. Some hosting platforms that people temporarily stand up phishing forms on, just block them. If there's no reason for anybody in your company to visit it, just kill it, right? Block all your inbound HTML attachments. We did it. You can do it. We manually review all of them because after getting 5 people phished in a week, when we had none for months before that, I was like, I'm done with this. I don't care if I have to look at all of them. And enable MFA, right? It's not going to stop every breach. It will give you a fighting chance. So out of all this data that you're collecting, you're going to perform a root cause analysis or an after action report, or both. If there are security improvements you've been begging for, this is your ammunition. You may not be able to blind management with science, but you can bury them in data. You can do it, and you can use it to get the tools that you want, but you have to document this stuff and be diligent about it. Make sure it's written at an appropriate level for your audience, and use your social engineering skills because most businesses don't like to hear that their SOC is wasting hours resetting passwords and doing IR. If they find out that this is what you're spending your time on and the fix is to just do this for all the users, they're probably going to get behind that. And again, if you have bad users, how can you help them help themselves? Some people are just not going to learn. And in my company, we don't fire them. We just do what we can to minimize the blast radius and the risk around their accounts if they were to get compromised. So, sometimes it's training, sometimes it's patching. If you have people getting targeted with 0-day stuff and your patching is months behind and maybe it's not even actually a 0-day, maybe this is something that came out 6 months ago, you need to fix your vulnerability management, right? What can you do to prevent these phishing emails to come in? What other steps can you take? Do the analysis, identify long-term and short-term goals. Try to find something, right? I like to take that information and say, you know what, we had this happen, and here's what we did, and here was the result. We had fewer incidents, and management loves to hear that stuff. So the other thing I like to do is give credit where credit is due. If somebody makes a good catch in the SOC, make sure management knows. If one of your users gave you a good early indicator of something, make sure management knows. If one of your tools is working really well, make sure management knows. So last minute, since I have to kind of wrap this up quick, make sure you're checking your other consoles. Don't develop tunnel vision. Don't get too focused on it that you're missing the perspective, right? I'm sorry, Dakota, for the meme. He knows what I'm talking about. If you start seeing more alerts for the same system or the same user, problem, escalate, right? but if you're not checking these things periodically, you might miss it. Communicate with your team. Try not to step on each other's toes and work the same incidents at the same time. Your tools will fail you and you'll need to talk to users. We had this one guy, he got a malicious spreadsheet through email. It wasn't our email, it was his personal Yahoo mail that he was checking on his work system, right? And I could see that he was on Yahoo Mail, and I could see the file show up, and I could see it execute and do the bad stuff, but I didn't really know the whole story until I called him and talked to him. And then we had a conversation about why we don't do that on work systems, because I would love to block that, but I can't. So don't waste time trying to find logs that don't exist when you can pick up the phone and call the user and find out right away. Divide and conquer. The checklist is really handy. If you've got this as a shared document of some sort and you have a real incident and you're like, you're going to do this, and 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 you're going to provide your updates in here, and management has access to it, and they can see what's still in progress, and they don't have to hassle somebody for updates, that's a win. Automate your information collection if you can. Try not to spend too much time collecting data. I love automation. Tune your systems. Do it. The fewer alerts you're looking at that are neutral or false positives, the more likely you are to catch the good stuff. Share your work. Have that central location for your documentation. So if somebody's seeing the same false positive again, or maybe you realize that this is the third time this person's got phished this year, and you don't necessarily know because maybe somebody else worked that incident the other time, or you're new or something, and you're like, you know what, this guy's a problem, we need to talk to him. Having that documentation helps you find those patterns. Or they can do the 8-hour remedial security training course. I keep telling IA they need to build it. I'll teach it, I wouldn't mind. Anyway, that's it in a very large nutshell. Like I said, I'm going to try to get this checklist, the speaker information, so you can just go there and download it, so you don't have to write all this down. But I got like 2 minutes for questions, or you can just catch me in the hallway. Yes? So are you familiar with NIST, like logging standards? So NIST, like you want to capture the who, what, when, where, why, and how, right? So if you can customize those logs to make sure you're including like the user that ran the process, the thing that they touched, the thing they modified, whether it was successful or not. And then, depending on your SIM, you can get that in your SIM. So as long as you're hitting that main, like, timestamp, user, process, successful, failure, what URL or whatever it is that they hit, that's usually enough to go on, at least in my experience. Anything else? Yes?
Some business systems are the opposite. They generate mathematical logs, say for operation, but like reconstructing operational is what happened. I propose it's very much like that. To set stuff to security, but it's a fairly minimal subset of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that something that is that something that's that you see as a problem, or is that something sort of log implementation?
Yeah, so if you're made of money, I just log everything, right? If you've got the licensing for it, just throw it in there. But user authentications are good as a minimum. Audit changes to the systems, so if somebody is modifying something, you always want to log that if changes are being made. That's what I'm saying. Like, if you've got a username associated with that, so say I'm trying to detect lateral movement, right? I need to know where that user's account was used. If I don't have the logs from your system with his name on it, I don't know that he used it on that system.
Yeah.
So anything that's got usernames or IP addresses, source workstations can be used for correlation for that. Now, if it's just like an internal, like I'm at 80% memory, I don't care.
Yeah,
that's nice. Yeah.
One thing operation I'm talking about reconstructing users day-to-day log, and you log everything you basically log them. And quality and level of understanding that I'm going to
It's, and you know, like you said, you have to kind of pick what's important. So, like I said, I like things like logons and log-offs, modifications to systems, modification to sensitive processes or data. Those are kind of the bare minimums. The more money you have, the more you can log, right? If I have infinite money, I can just log everything and call it good. And that's a lot of data to feed into something. You might be looking at. Yeah, in that case, I'd probably talk to the SOC and maybe like give them examples and say something like, hey, you know, here's what we have. What would you like? Because your IR team is not my IR team, and what I like to see is not necessarily what they want to see. So I'd probably work with the local people. All right, we're at time, so I will be around. The tall chick with the purple hair, I'm really hard to miss. So I'll see you around, okay?
Thank you.